Hello everyone, it's me Clayton. I just finished watching Castlevania Nocturne. So, after Netflix gave us one of the best video game adaptations of all time in the original Castlevania Netflix series, written by Warren Ellis, I naturally believed that it would have big shoes to fill, that this series would have big shoes to fill. Especially considering that the previous series gave us 4 seasons of bloody violence, great character development, awesome fight scenes, and it was an adaptation that embraced what made the Castlevania games so special. So, with Castlevania Nocturne taking inspiration from Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night, I certainly felt that this series had tons of potential. And thankfully, it's mostly living up to that potential. Castlevania Nocturne, written by Clive Bradley, is definitely a definitely a big step up in the animation game when it comes down to the fight scenes and the general character designs, and it has a pretty good story worth telling as well. Even if the story is more of a basic revenge plot this time, it still happens to give us the Richter and Maria that we wanted to see, as well as it takes liberties about as much as the original Castlevania Netflix series did. But let's get to the story, shall we? The story follows Richter Belmont, the protagonist of Castlevania Rondo of Blood and one of the protagonists of Symphony of the Night, who ends up witnessing his mother getting murdered by a vampire named Olrox as a child. However, as a young adult, he ends up in France during the French Revolution, and it turns out that the nobles of France have allied themselves with the vampires, and specifically a vampire messiah named Elizabeth Bathory, who is basically just Elizabeth Bathory as a vampire queen. Basically, she's a messiah who promises to crush the rebellion, and she's planning on having all of humanity look to her as a goddess, especially since she basically has obtained the blood of Sekhmet, the goddess of war. So, Richter, Maria, and a former slave named Annette, have to work together in order to take down Elizabeth Bathory, save France, and they find that they have some unlikely allies and enemies involved with the whole thing. So, while the plot isn't exactly anything new, I do love the historical setting of the French Revolution, and the cast involved are all really great at their parts. Whether it's Edward Bluemel as Richter, Pixie Davies as Maria, or even some special surprises with a few cameos that I won't spoil here, but they're definitely worthwhile if you've been a fan of the Netflix series for a while. There's a lot to love here when it comes to the protagonists. And thankfully, Elizabeth and her Lieutenant Drolta, and even Olrox to an extent, are examples of villains who are mostly evil when it comes down to it. I mean, the first two especially don't have any redeeming qualities about them. They are evil, evil women who just love to drink blood and make conquest. And much like Carmilla and her Striga Council in the original series, I like the fact that they're examples of villainous women who are completely unrepentant, and that just makes them fun to watch, but also it lets you know that they're not going to try and cheapen their evil with any sort of sympathetic backstories. That's the same for the other vampires who not only drink the blood of people, but some who happen to force others into slavery. Particularly with Annette's story. I know she's different from the Annette in the games, but I like the fact that her powers are based off the African god Ogun, which kind of reminds me of Ogun Montgomery from Fire Force, who had a similar power set. Apparently, Ogun's an actual African deity, so that makes sense as to why her powers are based off of him. On top of that, the animation really shines when it comes to not only the action scenes, but also in a lot of subtle character details. All the designs look really distinct and really cool. I especially love Elizabeth Bathory's dresses and her eventual final form. But I also just love all the effects and how the music cues even includes some of the old Castlevania songs, such as the Symphony of the Night theme at one point, which reminds me of when the original Castlevania used the Bloody Tears theme. It's definitely an adaptation that takes what works in the original game and it manages to work with its own original story that is entertaining in its own right. I definitely think that the series ending on a cliffhanger proves that they're confident they're going to get a season 2, but given how well animated and how fun this whole series is, it's probably going to get another season. And I say sign me up for it. I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. See you next time.